We're in part 3, and I love these chapters 19 and 20 where Katniss is basically going after Peeta and trying to nurse him back to health. I just love this interaction they have together. And Katniss, she's just so brilliant, and like her brain is so sharp. It's almost like she is tracking Peeta like she would prey in the woods. So they've announced that, you know, there can be 2 winners from the same district, and she is going looking for him. The only thing she really has to go off of is that he's been cut with a sword. So Cato thinks he's pretty injured, so he couldn't have gone like crazy far. And then she just kind of deduces if he's still going, then he's got to have fresh water, so he's got to be near a water source. And then she goes to the river and she sees some smeared blood, and she's like, oh, okay, this must be close by. And then Peeta has himself camouflaged to the point that she cannot see a difference when his eyes are closed, and like mad skills. But also I'm like, is that realistic? Can you camouflage yourself that well so that a trained hunter cannot tell the difference between you being part of this natural landscape? That it's a little bit of a stretch of the imagination for me, but I do love that it's like the baker boy, because he decorated cakes, knows how to conceal himself that well while injured. Let's not forget that. And then again, I love Peeta is hilarious. I love Peeta's character so much. When she finds him, he says something about like, you know, we're madly in love, so you can kiss me anytime you want. And she laughs. He's so good at like breaking the tension and breaking the ice with Katniss, I think, because she's kind of high strung. And I mean, for good reason. You're in the middle of a death arena, you know what I'm saying? So he's trying to like joke around, make her laugh, and then her internal monologue, she's like, oh yes, that's right, we're madly in love. Which, one, that is a little bit of a jump. No one ever confirmed that she had feelings for him back, but I guess she's saying like, that's how we're gonna win over the Capitol and get more sponsors, I guess. She is laughing with him, thinking about that. She's trying to nurse him back to health. It's not looking good. His wound is pretty bad, and he's still like picking on her. He's like, man, you're pretty squeamish, right? Like, how are you a hunter? I love it. And I feel like maybe this is endearing for me because I feel like my husband does similar things. I am much more the high-strung one in our relationship, and he will crack little jokes when he knows I can handle it. You know, like he'll let me be in my feels at times, but then he also can tell when, you know, something needs to break the tension that I'm feeling a little bit. So he's cracking jokes here and there. She gets him somewhat hidden. Haymitch sends her a gift, something to feed him, like some soup. And I love her assumption too of what Haymitch is saying as well, like one kiss, you only get one bowl of soup or whatever. I love her. Again, it's like her and Haymitch's connection, they're so much alike, so I feel like they can just kind of communicate like that. Whereas another tribute that Haymitch mentored may not get some of the subtlety of what he's trying to communicate. Oh, also, she kisses Peeta, and she talked about like that's her first kiss, which is just super endearing to Katniss because she hasn't had time for love or romance. She's literally just trying to survive. And she's only 16, like she is young. And then his lips were too hot with the fever. It's like, can you imagine? I don't know. That's just like, it gives me the ick just thinking about that. Like these too hot lips. And that being her first kiss. And then she's like trying to coax the soup into him, and she's like, and yes, I used more kisses to get the soup down or whatever. And I love Katniss and her, I don't know, she's just like putting up with this very hot boy's kisses, and she is kissing him, and I don't know, just the thought of that. But she's doing what she needs to do. She's trying to keep him alive, keep herself alive. Oh no. I love when she's like trying to get him cleaned up and she's like worrying about him being naked under all the mud and muck. And she's just such a prude, and I love it. Again, not a judgment. At 16, I would have been the exact, I mean, this is getting weird. I would still be weirded out by that scenario for sure. But especially at 16. And I think this is just so well written. You can picture her discomfort. And Peter being like, oh, I don't care if you see me. And she's like, well, I care. And then they're hanging out in this cave. He's asking her to tell him stories. And again, she's just showing how much she cares about her sister with this story about how she got her sister's goat. And in some ways, I just feel like she's really opening up to him. And again, she's letting like the world into her love for her sister, which is what, you know, kind of started a lot of people's kind of rooting for her, is her love for her sister, her protection of her sister. And I love in her story talking about how she, in a fit of giddiness, tied a pink ribbon around the goat's neck. I'm just like, it's so precious. She's just a kid, you know? And I think stories like that, moments like that kind of show how exciting little things can be, that like childlike wonder. And she's so excited to give her sister a gift that she knows she's gonna like freak out over, you know? And I think adults could use a little more of that kind of giddiness, but it's nice to see the window of like she hasn't lost some of that childlike excitement, I think, even though she doesn't get to express it very often. She doesn't get to like feel those feelings very much. I thought it was definitely interesting in her story about the goat and how the butcher basically said she wasn't going to take it because Katniss seemed interested in it, and her like winking at Katniss. Peeta said that a lot of people like Katniss, and that she doesn't know the effect that she has on people. And I think moments like that kind of nod to he's probably more accurate in his perception of that than she is, because I mean the butcher could have potentially made money off of that and instead almost gave Katniss the option. So I thought that was just like a really cool idea of the goodness of humanity, the goodness of people, and how it seems like they in some ways try to look out for each other. Like, you've got to keep yourself and your family safe and fed first and foremost, but they're gonna also try to look after the girls who lost their dad. And again, we don't know how many of these people actually have ties to her dad, Burdick, and her mom for that matter, because they went to school together, or they were family friends or neighbors or whatever. So, love that window into more of the culture in District 12. Again, a lot of sweet moments with her and Peeta. She's telling him this story, and I love him calling her out as a liar, or as a bad liar, I mean, because she at one point said, oh, your fever's gone down a little bit or something, and he was like, okay. And he like points out that he knew that was a lie, even though he didn't really address it in the moment, that her saying something about like, well, you know, the goat will pay for itself after some time anyway, was not the whole truth at the very least. Like, okay, sure, that might be true, but she's also just really excited to give her sister a gift that she knows she'll like, and him just kind of calling her out on that as her being a bad liar, that he can tell, and he can like read her that well. But then he like doesn't catch that she's essentially drugging him with sleep syrup so that she can go to the feast to get his medicine. It's just, yeah, this fierceness that she has to protect Peeta and his directness. I think that's something that's a little bit different in the books than it is the movies. It doesn't come across as much in the movies to me for how maybe bold or I don't know if boldness is the right word, but Peeta is like willing to call Katniss out on her stuff. And I mean, it's not him being like overtly rude or anything, but he's like, hey, I know you're full of it, you know? That, and I don't know, he just comes across as more like sassy maybe in the books, where he's not afraid to be a little bit snarky back at Katniss when she says something that he thinks is ridiculous. And I don't remember that as much in the movies, and maybe I just don't remember it. Maybe it is there, but Peeta comes across as more like passive, and in my mind, I mean, he still fights for things. Like, he's still in the movie fought for her not to go to the feast and everything, but it's a little bit different when he's like making little comments here and there to like kind of call her out. I'm sure there was more thoughts about all of their sweet interactions, but I think that's all I can remember. And one more from chapters 19 and 20, when Peeta is like kind of half delirious or whatever, and he's just like staring up at Katniss, and she says in her mind something like, man, he looks like he could just look at me all day. He's good at this. Like pretending to be in love. It's like, girl, he actually likes you. He's not pretending. She's so oblivious, and I love it. Like, Katniss is one of my favorite characters of any like fictional world, I think, because she's just it's just so hard for her to comprehend that somebody could like feel that way towards her, and it's not just all about survival for them. Sweet girl. She's just, yep, he's great actor, Katniss, great actor. No girl, he actually would love to just sit there and look at you all day. Also, Katniss talking about, from the look on his face, I know I've done something unforgivable. Like, yeah, you basically lied to him and forced him to take something that would make him fall asleep. That's a crime in most places in our world now, right? Yeah, I mean, we know that Peeta still loves her, and, you know, he gets kind of over it, I guess, but yeah, and I know it's for a good reason. Like, you saved both of your lives, but also you kind of drugged him. Oops. Probably not an easy thing to get past. I feel like it's also kind of heartbreaking that Katniss and Peeta have their whole like exchange about lying. You know, he says she's a terrible liar, and at the end of the chapter, she's talking about who can't lie now, Peeta, because she tricked him and drugged him. But she thinks she's a fantastic liar because she thinks this is all a performance and an act with her being interested in Peeta. And I think she's lying to herself, but I think she thinks that she's a very good liar, because it's like, well, no, because she recognizes that she's not good at the act of it all or whatever. But it's just funny that it's like Peeta called out these other lies, and I'm sure that's why it's even more. Sorry, my dog's making an appearance. That's probably why he's even more perplexed at the end when he's basically like, why don't you but then it was all an act, and like, you don't love me, and it's like, I mean, like, I'm sure he felt like he was reading her wrong, even though he could definitely tell other times when she was lying. But I just can't imagine how confused Peeta must have been, because it's like, he's not wrong. She does care for him. She's just also lying to herself. But anyway. Man, chapter 21. I love this chapter too. We're just at the climax in the book, and everything's getting so good. Katniss is going to the feast, and I love her being so salty with Foxface for essentially being ready to pounce as soon as the bags come up or appear in the arena or whatever. I feel like she has this weird bitterness towards Foxface. I don't know, it's almost like, I think she's almost jealous at how cunning Foxface is. Like, anytime she comments on her, she's just like, man, why is she so smart? man, she's had everyone underestimating her. It kind of makes me think of how it's presented that Joanna's games were. Like, if Foxface wasn't taken out by the berries later, and would she have won if Cato and Peeta and Katniss were, like, going at each other? If that would be kind of like a story of, like, Joanna, of almost making everyone underestimate you, and really you're, like, brilliant, and you're just kind of lying in wait for your moment. You're kind of biding your time and letting everyone else go after the ones that think each other's a bigger threat, if that makes sense. So there's that. And then Clove, she comes across as so, like, is sadistic the word I'm looking for? I don't know if that's the right word, but, like, she really is wanting to relish in Katniss's demise. And one, I'm surprised that she was able to convince Cato to let her take on Katniss, because he seemed so gung-ho about, like, oh, she's mine, earlier in the book, before Katniss sends some tracker jackers down on him. And it seems like he would have been even more mad after that incident, so I don't know, I'm just really surprised that he went along with that. Also, I really want to know where Cato is, and it's during this whole feast thing, because I get that he's kind of, like, waiting, has her back. Katniss hypothesizes that maybe he's, like, waiting on Thresh or Peeta to try to, like, get the jump on them. I don't know, but I don't know if he wasn't there to intervene sooner when Thresh shows up. Like, what was he doing? And maybe she's right. Maybe he was waiting for Thresh and guessed wrong on where he'd be, but it's just perplexing to me why he wasn't more readily available to be backup for Clove. But yeah, Clove comes off as super intense and super creepy. She kind of does that a little bit in the movie, but in the book, she's just ready to maim Katniss. And I guess that's the whole thing with the careers. Maybe that's common for the careers, but it's one thing to have to go into the games and to try to take people out. It's another to enjoy it and relish in it. And that's interesting to me. Like, that's telling of her character, I guess. But maybe she was just overcome with jealousy because Katniss was getting so much attention. I don't know, but that was weird for me. And then Thresh comes up and saves the day. I do think it's a little bit of a nod to paying it forward, and, you know, your act of kindness can pay off in ways that you don't really expect later on. Like, her teaming up with Rue had nothing to do with Thresh. That was probably the furthest thing from her mind. And then that's the reason that her life was spared at the feast. And it's just really precious too. I want to know if Thresh and Rue had any kind of, like, relationship, not romantic. They seem to be very substantial age gap, but just if they were friends, or, like, how they knew each other, or if it's just the fact she's a 12-year-old girl and everyone in the districts tend to be enraged by the young ones being tributes, because just how all of it's unfair, but you got a 12-year-old there, you know, like, that just kind of takes the cake. So I don't know if he's just like, wow, she's so young and innocent and this is just so wrong, or if they actually had some kind of relationship, friendship, how they knew each other, because it seemed like he was very upset at the idea of Cliff taking out Rue. But also, it may have just been in the way that he imagined that it happened, because he was like, did you cut on her like you were about to cut on this girl? So maybe it was also that premise of, you know, it's one thing to take people out because this is the hand we were dealt. It's another thing to relish in it. So, I don't know. But he seemed very emotionally invested in that. And the fact that he felt almost like he owed Katniss something just because she kind of took care of Rue. Well, she was allied with her and she took care of her in her final moments. That, to me, seems like there's a lot of weight to the relationship that he had with Rue, you know? But then Rue didn't follow him around as a shadow like she did Katniss. So, I don't know. I wish we knew more about the relationship with him and Rue. And then, he spares Katniss as a debt paid kind of thing. And I really like Thresh as a character. I think it would be interesting if there was what they call novellas published of just a little snippet of Thresh's perspective on all of it, which maybe there wouldn't be enough material on it, but I wish we got more in his head and kind of had an idea of how he was processing all of it and how his time was spent in the games. I think, if I remember correctly, it's assumed that the mutts at the end get Thresh, and that's how the games end for him. But what was he spending his time doing in that, field for is it weeks by the end? I mean, a week? I don't remember how long it is, but anyway. And then I love that he took the District 2 pack as well. Love that. And I was wondering about that, if there were any rules that they don't go over of why people wouldn't just take all of the packs, because even if I don't need it, someone else might, and I want to take away their options. But I guess that's the whole point of why you need to all get there at the same time, so people don't run off with the stuff intended for you. But yeah, I just, it's like this vindication when he grabbed the District 2 pack as well. And I really want to know what happens with, again, that in between time between Cato and Thresh. Did he chase after Thresh and try to get the bag? I'm assuming they didn't tango, because it seems like that's not what took out either of them. And if not, how did Cato survive without the pack? I just want to know, all these days while Katniss and Peeta are barely hanging on in the cave, what is happening? But yeah, it's an exciting chapter. We're at the good part. Chapter 22, what another gem. Katniss is recovering. Peeta's pretty much good to go. And they have this conversation where Katniss is telling him and opening up about what happened to Rue, because she's trying to explain why Thresh let her go. He's surprised that someone would basically let her go to essentially not feel like they're in her debt in some way. And she makes some comment about, well, if you were from the seam, you would get it, because it's basically terrible to feel like you owe someone. And this is what I'm saying about Peeta being so much more snarky in the books than in the movies. Because he was like, oh yeah, I guess I'm just too dim to get it. Don't even try to explain. Those comments really get under his skin. You can tell, because he's like, I'm not stupid. If you just talk to me about it, I'm sure I can empathize. And I think maybe that's something that's hard for Katniss to realize, is that Peeta is actually really empathetic, and he can, I don't know, imagine probably more than she thinks he can. And again, he hasn't just lived this life of rainbows and sunshine. We know everyone's life in the districts are hard to some extent. But then he also, we know, has a violent mother, and I don't know. Sure, maybe he never went hungry, but he's also dealt with his own stuff that I think she kind of overlooks sometimes. And then she's struggling to open up. They have their first real kiss, and she's talking about how she felt something and how she wanted more, but more doesn't come. And I think that's hilarious, because again, she's still just she does not understand her own feelings. And even later, she's talking about how it's all an act or whatever, and it's girl, you really getting the butterflies. You wanted to keep kissing this boy. And she's oh yeah, but it's all just a big ruse. I love Katniss. She's such a good character. And then she asks Peeta when his crush starts, because, she still thinks this is all, a big game and they're all acting and whatever. And then Peeta goes on this really sweet story about how his dad pointed her out on the first day and said that her dad sang so beautifully that the birds stopped singing. Also, kind of a weird story to tell your 5-year-old son. Okay, you know that classmate over there? I had a thing for her mom. Like, I really wanted to marry her, but I got stuck with your mom instead. Like, that's a weird anecdote. But to each their own. And then she did sing and the birds hushed and he says something about, and at that moment I knew I was a goner. Like, how precious is that? I love Peeta. He's just so good with his words. And she comments on that too. Like, that's a thing. Peeta's so good with his words. But that's one of my favorite lines of probably any book. That it was then I knew that I was a goner because she sang so beautifully. And then again, Katniss's inner monologue where she's like, that seems weird that he knows all these details about me. And I mean, that does sound true. I kind of remember that happening, but this is all made up. Or is it? If maybe these details were true, then maybe there's more to it. And she's still just like not piecing together that homeboy actually has a crush on her and that she has a crush on him too. Oh man, Katniss. Sweet, oblivious Katniss. I think that's pretty much all the thoughts I had. Her line about you don't have competition anywhere. It's so cheesy. She's so awkward and I love it. But it got him some food. So there you go. Oh, and in chapter 22, Katniss brings up the whole she still owes him for that day in the rain and he threw her the bread. I love how Peeta's so perplexed. He's like, that was so long ago. Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, you kept me alive. And he's like, well, you just basically revived me by getting me this, nursing me back to health and getting me this medicine. Like, I think we can let that go. So funny. Where, again, Peeta's just like, what are you talking about, bro? I love their dynamic. Chapter 23. I love how cute Katniss and Peeta are still in their little cave. It's like their little love nest, and that's where, like, Katniss can actually let down some of her guard. Well, she says she's still acting, but, I mean, you can't deny that your natural blushes are not an actual reaction. And Peeta, he's just such a smooth talker, talking about the best thing that's ever happened to you and kind of picking at her a little bit. I think Peeta likes seeing her be a little uncomfortable with how he feels about her. And he's just so willing to say his feelings, and she's so not. It's pretty adorable. It's also pretty adorable how they're like kind of poking fun at Haymitch and talking about how Haymitch will be their neighbor if they make it out, everything. Just very sweet little like banter back and forth. They realize that Thresh has died. I want to know what happened to him. I think they play that differently in the movie. I really thought they made it seem like the Mutts took Thresh out, but maybe it was Cato and they were kind of going after each other. I don't know. And I hope they actually reveal that with the game's recap or something. They are going out to hunt, and Peeta's being super loud. I feel like all of her comparison of like Gale versus Peeta in her mind is just about how Gale is more of a provider, physically, more so for like food and hunting and, you know, protection in the woods. But I think she's kind of missing, she doesn't voice how Peeta is kind of like a protector for her to feel safe and vulnerable emotionally. But I think the contrast between the two is pretty clear. Well, I don't know. She does allude to Gale being her best friend. She can be real with him. But again, it doesn't often seem like emotional feelings much with her and Gale. And again, maybe we just see more with her and Peeta and their story. But it all just seems very like flirtatious. And again, maybe it just comes down to Peeta was straight up about how he felt, and maybe Gale has felt that way for a while about Katniss but has never voiced it. Maybe she would have gotten all like giddy and, you know, shy about it, with Gale too if he had been straight up with her. I don't know. But she's talking about how Gale has that like leathery footsteps or whatever. It's silent in the woods, and Peeta's over there making so much noise. She was like, I want to give him a task, but I feel like his pride won't take that or whatever, so she can go off and hunt. And then Peeta like immediately suggests that and is like, you need to go off and hunt, I'll go stay away. And again, I think the timing of that is so intentional. This is Katniss's perception of how she thinks Peeta will respond, because I guess assuming everyone has this like hyper masculinity need to provide, and instead Peeta's like able to kind of self-reflect and be like, I don't think this is good for us if I stay by you with this. So I love that Peeta is just so like soft in some ways. She finds he stops responding to her. She freaks out, even though she didn't hear a cannon, so I don't know why. I think it was just this fight or flight, like panic mode when she didn't hear his response back, which I don't blame her. And again, the same thing with Rue. Like, she hadn't heard a cannon fire then either, and she literally had to watch Rue die. So you can completely understand why she would freak out. And you know, the self-awareness too of my fear comes out as anger when she finds him and she's yelling at him or fussing at him. And I love how patient Peeta is with her, because it's like he kind of understands. It's like he understands that it is a fear response, right? And she's just worried about him. And he's being so patient, but she even notices like he's trying not to get mad back, especially about the cheese. And again, this made me think of my husband. So much of this, I mean, my husband is also like a fierce physical protector as well, but so much of Peeta's tenderness reminds me of my husband. Some of his other traits remind me of my husband, where if I had accused him of eating the cheese and he told me no, and I was still just like, you had to have eaten the cheese, the apples didn't eat the cheese, like, he would have been so mad. But he's like, bro, I didn't eat the cheese, just trust my words. And I think Peeta is just really patient with her. I know it sounds like he's mad, but he's still trying to be calm. And then they hear the cannon, and Katniss, she's so sharp. Again, she like pieces it together of, oh, okay, the hovercraft is lifting up Foxface. She must have been the one that took the cheese and trusted the berries that Peeta picked. That was ultimately to her doom, which is, it's unfortunate, but I don't know, I think that's probably a better end than maybe some of the more gruesome ones like Clove was trying to give Katniss. But I don't know, I feel like I have a soft spot for Foxface, even though we don't know much about her really, just Katniss observing how smart she is. But again, she reminds me of Katniss, that she's a survivor and she uses her wit. So, oh, I had another thought about when they're picking on Haymitch and they're like, how did he win his games? And they're like, he must have outsmarted him. And Katniss is trying to think through, and she's like, he's so surly, like no one would have allied with him, which is funny because we now know from Sunrise on the Reaping that they literally had this massive alliance, and that Haymitch was one of the major players in that. And again, kind of sad with her being like, I don't want to be like Haymitch and be alone and, you know, struggle with substance use. And it's kind of heartbreaking again, knowing the details of Haymitch's story of he wouldn't have been alone. Like, he had a girl that he loved, he had a brother and a mom, and it's just the fate of a victor is never pretty. It's like once your name is reaped, your life is not going to be rainbows and sunshine. But I do love that they can recognize Haymitch is smart and that it must have been his wit, which I do think that was part of it. But there was also a lot of people that helped him, and there was also a lot of just luck. Like the ending of Sunrise on the Reaping, when it was between him and the last girl, I think that was just straight up luck that he drops down for the axe to kind of ricochet back. But anyway, I love that it doesn't really sit well with Peeta that it was his berries the reason that Foxface died. Like, he's just so tenderhearted, and I love it. Don't have a ton of thoughts about chapter 24. That are really just having a leisure day. Katniss is kind of thinking about
the differences between Foxface and Kato, and how she doesn't really think she knows Kato very well to know how to anticipate his movements. And then they're kind of being corralled to the area around the cornucopia. I think it's interesting that we see Kato at the end of the chapter being chased by the Mutts, which is different from the movie, because in the movie, Katniss and Peeta were also corralled to the cornucopia by the Mutts. But then their hiding spot with the water is just a very mild way to get them together, as opposed to like Kato actually being chased. So it kind of makes me wonder if the game makers wanted Kato at a disadvantage because they wanted it to be Katniss and Peeta at the end, because then they would have to turn on each other, because, you know, they're going to do the whole only one victor can win switcheroo at the end. So it kind of makes me think they wanted it to come down to Katniss and Peeta so they could have that big reveal. But I don't know. So not a ton going on in this one. It's just we're in the end game now.
Chapter 25. Katniss's fight or flight mode is so funny. She just like bolts for the cornucopia after Kato runs by and didn't even give a second thought to Peeta until she's already almost there. And then she's like, oh wait, Peeta, I should probably check on him. While Peeta, still having the bum leg, is trying his best to get there. Can't run very fast. But yeah, they are just going through it with the Mutts. Kato is just kind of like recovering. Then Katniss realizes that all of the Mutts are kind of like based on one of the tributes, and it really kind of like messes with her head, especially when she sees Rue. She and Peeta are talking like, are those their real eyes, or do they have any of their memories? I'm curious what you think. I am inclined to think they were just given attributes like the different tributes, but I don't know. I can't imagine how memories would be transplanted into them, but again, it is the capital. They have all this crazy futuristic technology, so who knows. And then Kato grabs Peeta, but Peeta and Katniss work together. They kind of outsmart him. She shoots him in the hand, and Peeta is able to kind of like knock him down. But then when they anticipate that the Mutts are going to kind of end him quickly, they don't, and they just like maim him for hours. And then Peeta and Katniss are just sitting up there in the cold hearing it. Like, ugh. And it's just hard for me to imagine. They were saying this is like the finale for the Capitol and this is what it's all about. No one will be able to look away from the TV. But can you imagine? Like, I don't know how anyone could actually watch something like that. And especially knowing it's real life. Oh my gosh. And after hours and hours, Katniss is able to get a mercy kill shot for him. Description kind of turns your stomach. And then the games aren't ending. They're not picking up what's left of Kato. And so they, they're kind of like, what's up? They're trying to walk away from the body to see if the hovercraft needs more room, essentially. And then they announce that there can only be one victor, and basically, JK, you both can't win. And again, my girl's fight or flight kicks in when Peeta is like walking towards her with a knife, and she raises her boat to actually fight him. But it's so funny because then she's like, no, I can't kill you. I can't let you kill yourself. And even though she like raised her boat to protect herself. But again, all of Katniss's survival is based on self-defense and self-preservation. She doesn't want to go on the offensive if she can help it. And then Peeta is trying to remove the bandage so he can just bleed out, essentially. And Katniss comes up with, the classic Nightlock double suicide thing, so the Capitol doesn't have a victor, but it's definitely a plan for her. She just thinks she's kind of figured it out and they'll let them both live. And they do. They announce there's 2 winners, but they get much closer to actually taking the Nightlock in comparison to the movie, because they actually have it in their mouth and everything. And then they're able to spit it out. They both win. They're getting on the hovercraft. And then Katniss is freaking out. Like, they're trying to separate her and Peeta.
he's being taken away to be operated on because his leg is in very bad shape. And she's freaking out trying to get to him. She's beating on the glass. And then finally, I guess almost goes like catatonic, just kind of watching what's happening. She thinks his heart stops a couple times. But that makes me wonder why they would actually work so hard to save PETA, like as the Capitol medics. Why not just let him die? And then you still only end up with one victor, and it would punish Katniss. I don't understand why they work to heal him, because then again you don't have the double victor issue. I guess maybe at that point the damage had already been done and everyone had seen Katniss make a fool of the Capitol, but I don't know why they would. I'm still trying to think through it. Like Haymitch, in some ways some of the damage was already done. They were able to edit a lot of it out, make it look a lot different than it was, but they still really punished him, like took out his family and his girlfriend. So again, if Katniss is outsmarting the Capitol, making them look like fools, why not just let PETA die? So, I don't know. That one's weird for me. You could literally explain it to the public as his injuries were too severe. His heart stopped. And then just don't resuscitate him. So, I don't know what happened. That bit about them going into the hovercraft and Katniss freaking out, that was actually part of chapter 26. But they blurred together a bit in my mind. And then they end up injecting Katniss and knock her out and start nursing her back to health. I guess it's alluded to that it's Haymitch that is the one she hears with a similar accent to home, that's like fussing with people outside of her room, and it makes her feel like someone's watching out for her. And my assumption is that's his argument with the game makers about her augmentation. He's fighting against that and ends up winning, and there's a compromise and she has to wear a padded dress to enhance her curves. Which again, how disgusting. You have a 16-year-old girl that because she's a victor, you're gonna do body augmentation that she did not consent to. Makes me so mad thinking about. But she is finally allowed up, and she goes into the room with Effie, Haymitch, and Cinna, and I love that she runs straight to Haymitch. And I mean, it seemed like she felt more endearment towards Cinna at the beginning of the games, but I guess it's just, I don't know if Haymitch kind of reminds her of home and there's that comfort there, or the fact that he really came through with the sponsorships and the gifts and helped keep her alive. I don't know, but that just touched my heart when she runs up to Haymitch and he says something about, "You did it, sweetheart." And again, just now knowing the backstory of Luella and the sweetheart term, just such a sweet, sweet, touching moment between Haymitch and Katniss. And I think when you really start to see their budding relationship, I guess. And then you see Haymitch again when she's getting ready to go on the stage. Everybody's going to their places or whatever. And he's trying to whisper to her that she's in trouble, that Capitol doesn't like being outsmarted. And sweet Katniss, she's like, man, I didn't even think about that. I was just trying to like stick it to the game makers, but now I have my mom and sister and PETA to worry about. And I love her being like, "Did you tell PETA?" And he's like, "Don't have to." And he's basically like, pretend to be madly in love. And then she's also analyzing, it's like, what, does PETA already kind of know that we're in trouble? Or does he mean he already is in love with me? And it's like, girl, PETA is not that good of an actor. Like, yeah, homeboy, he is definitely feeling feelings for you. But she's like so funny till the end, still so perplexed by PETA's feelings for her, even though he has hinted and straight up told her, she thought it was an act, how he feels. But Haymitch, can you imagine what Haymitch is experiencing now, knowing what we know after Sunrise on the Reaping, and how he stuck it to the Capitol, made the game makers look like fools, even though they kind of propagandaed it and tweaked the footage and whatnot to make it look different than what happened. But he really pissed off the Capitol, and then lost everyone that he cares about in horrific ways. And I can only imagine he sees himself in Peeta, this like love-struck boy, and then, you know, knowing that their love story is like teetering on the edge of a knife, like one wrong step and everyone they care about is gonna be gone, like his family and his loved ones. It's just tragic. Can't imagine what he must have been feeling in that moment. I feel like Haymitch is just desperately trying to keep Katniss and her loved ones safe. Like, you know, no one was able to keep him safe. I think he just so desperately doesn't want to see what happened to him happen to her and to Peeta. Which again is really touching, like how much he actually really cares about them. And I'm sure he's got to be so relieved that he finally had some tributes that survived, not only one but two, and so he didn't have to say goodbye to any of his tributes this time around. But then the fear, probably relief of like, oh, these two that I came to care about have survived, but also you're in a lot of danger right now, and so trying to keep her safe, her and Peeta safe. Now it's like the relief, but then fear. It has to be. It's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Okay, I'm splitting up chapter 27 because I know I'm forgetting stuff. For the first part, Katniss is kind of freaking out with the realization that she might be in trouble. And they go on stage, and I hate the little like girlish act. It drives me nuts. I get why she's doing it, and I get why she needs to do it, that it works for them. Trying to play off that she's just a foolish girl in love. I'm just like, that's not Katniss. Like, she is not giddy and girly and just throwing her feet up in the love seat or whatever. I hate that. Also, super annoying that they talk about that it shows each of the tributes' deaths, but it doesn't tell us what happened to Thresh. I want to know what happened to Thresh, because I've said this before, I think in the movie it kind of leads you to believe that it was the Mutts, but then Katniss and Peeta are convinced it was Cato. I want to know what happened. I want to know. Does anyone know? Has Suzanne Collins given an interview and told us what happened to Thresh? Then they're ushering Katniss and Peeta back to their rooms and everything, and Haymitch is working so hard to keep them apart. I'm not sure if he's just afraid they're going to give something away with the Capitol cameras and everything being bugged, or that Katniss will, or if he doesn't want Katniss to basically let Peeta know it was all an act. I say that in quotes because Katniss definitely has feelings for the boy, but she doesn't know what her feelings are. Like, she hasn't sorted them out internally yet. But if he doesn't want Katniss to be honest with Peeta about that yet, because he still needs them playing on the whole, you know, silly in love scheme, plot, whatever, and if when Peeta finds out, he's gonna be crushed. So I feel like maybe it's a little bit of both. That's why Haymitch didn't actually address it with Peeta directly. I also love Katniss. When she sits down to watch the games recap, she says something about, how did the tributes do it to rewatch the games? I guess it's worse for us. This is me paraphrasing. I don't remember the actual verbiage. Worse for us because the Capitol's just looking for a reason to kill us. And I guess other tributes don't have the Capitol looking for reasons to kill us or whatever. I'm like, oh, sweet, naive Katniss. How many times has this actually happened in the past? We know there was issues with Haymitch, and I am of the belief that it happened with probably a lot of other games too. I can't imagine that in 75 years of the Hunger Games that only 2 of them had rebellious acts. And then I love Sweet Peeta. He was moaning her name when he was laying in the mud bank. Sweet, lovesick Peeta. And then I gotta give Snow props. I imagine the whole thing with the crown is cool. Like, to just twist the one crown and it turns into 2 crowns. Pretty slick. I like it. When they're sitting down for the interview with Caesar, And Peeta says something about Haymitch is keeping us apart or whatever, and he says something about, but it's just this, and then we go back home. Haymitch can't keep us apart forever. And she says something about she gets a shiver and she doesn't know why. And I'm just analyzing that. Is it because she's excited to potentially be alone with Peeta, or is she nervous because she doesn't know what she feels? And then Caesar goes and asks her, when did you know you were in love with him? And she's so awkward because, again, she still doesn't think she's in love with him, and maybe she's not. I mean, I think she definitely cares for him, but you know, there's different philosophies on what being in love means. And then when they were talking about, she realized in the tree that she could potentially keep him. That's so sweet, and I think that's sincere. She has said so many times throughout the book, I didn't want to lose the boy with the bread, which makes the ending of this chapter even more heartbreaking when Peeta knows a lot of it was an act or playing up for the cameras, and she's like, basically, I know I'm gonna be losing the boy with the bread. That's so pitiful because she cares so deeply for him. She just can't figure out what that actually means for herself, but she cares so much for Peeta. Some of Peeta's flirty lines are so precious too, and he says something about, now that you've got me, what are you gonna do with me? Like, how flirty. I love it. I feel like it's just laced with this intimate tension. I feel like he's alluding to some things there, but it's also just playful enough to, I don't know, kind of pick at her because he knows she's kind of a prude. And then when he kisses her, she said something about, I keep you somewhere where you can't get hurt. And again, I think that is very much how she feels about Peeta. Like, she wants to keep him safe. She cares very deeply for the boy with the bread. But it's hard for her to think about feelings of intimacy, even though she has some kind of attraction to him, because she talked about some of them kisses in the cave where she wanted more. I don't really know why they didn't tell Katniss about Peeta's leg before the interview, unless they wanted to get her true reaction on camera, but that seems kind of messed up. I feel like I get the keeping her and Peeta separate because not wanting them to say too much or to let on that something was going on, but that seems cruel to me, because if you know Katniss at all, you know she's gonna feel responsible and feel bad that she basically made him lose his leg. But I mean, obviously, logically, and I think Peeta acknowledges too, she saved his life, but of course she's gonna feel responsible to some extent. I just think that was pretty messed up. And then for Peeta to find out that she's not actually in love with him by Haymitch just basically being like, good job, guys. Great act. And Haymitch knew good and well that Peeta still believed she truly cared about him. And I'm not sure if he was trying to do like a mercy for Peeta, because especially after knowing about Sunrise on the Reaping, how he cared so deeply for Lenore Dove, maybe he thinks like, oh, I would want to know, and this is the earliest I can like let him know. But it just, again, it feels like there's got to be a better way to have that conversation, which, and again, maybe Haymitch had to be the one to do it, because I don't know if Katniss would have ever worked up the courage, or at least until after they got back home. But Homegirl is just not very good at expressing herself and her feelings, and I think that's why there's so much tension even once they get back home. I don't think it's until Peeta actually extends the olive branch and he's like, can we please try to be friends, that they actually start interacting at all again. But it just feels cruel. But again, maybe there's no good way to have that conversation or to let him know that she is not as into him as he is into her. I think that I just don't agree with the argument that I've read from some people of Katniss not actually having feelings for Gale and there not being a true love triangle. I think her feelings are definitely stronger for Peeta throughout the whole thing, but I think she just feels some sense of loyalty, or like there's a betrayal with Gale. If for nothing else, and I think she had an inkling that maybe he cared for her, that maybe when she was leaving for the games, the remember that or whatever, and then Gale gets forcibly removed from the room, that he's probably going to say, I love you. I think, and again, Katniss is very intuitive, right? And so I don't think it's a very thought out emotion of why she feels this tie to Gale, but I think all of it's just confusing for her. But I think there's definitely something there. And maybe it's not even on her end. Maybe she truly does not think of Gale that way. But I think she has an inkling that there's more to her and Gale's relationship, and that something about this, how she's been going about things with Peeta, isn't fair to both of them. And I think that's clear by her saying that, one, she's said things in the games about it's weird to think about Peeta and Gale like together, essentially. I can't remember exactly, but I think it's when her and Peeta are in the cave and she's with Peeta and she's like, it's too weird to think about Gale. And again, I think it's the same reason she feels this weird sense of betrayal, because her and Gale, they're not in a relationship, but it's like she knows they're not truly platonic either. And then at least, again, it may just be her having the sense that it's all on his part. Like maybe he doesn't feel platonically towards her, but regardless, she feels like there's something that's not right about her thinking, feeling, expressing romantic feelings towards Peeta because of Gale. That's why the idea of both of them can't coexist in the same thought for her. And I think we see that again here at the end of chapter 27, where she's like, oh, he picked these flowers, they're actually wild onions, that's making me think of Gale, and this is weird for me. So I think that's just a clear indication that there's something more to their relationship, and why I think people are completely off base when they say that she didn't actually care about Gale and that she was trying to appease him. And again, maybe it is on Gale's part only and she is appeasing him in that way, but she's confused about something. And then also, sweet Peeta, he is just so patient with her. Again, he reminds me so much of my husband sometimes. Like, as I'm going back through this, I'm like, oh, I can definitely see him, my husband, in this. But he's so patient with her while she's trying to work it out, and he's trying to be understanding of like, oh, okay, so that was an act. She's like, well, not all of it. And he's like, well, what part was it? Like, what's left over? You know, it's like he's still so hurt, but by essentially her not feeling the same way about him he feels about her. But it's like he's still got this hope, and he's trying to be patient with her and figure out what she does feel. And I think it's disappointing and probably feels a little unfair that they've been out of the games for days at this point and she hasn't figured it out, you know? So he's probably like, okay, I get that we were fighting for our lives, but what about now that we're not fighting for our lives? And he hasn't had to worry about this same level of, this is the real Hunger Games and we're trying to fight against the Capitol coming down hard on our rebellion. I think she is still very much in a state of fight or flight, but I think it's hard for him to grasp that, because he's at the same time finding out the girl of his dreams is not actually in love with him. He's also finding out that they were in intense danger for the last few days. I just don't think it's very fair how Haymitch and Katniss have handled this with Peeta. Sweet guy. But then him still trying to protect himself, protect her, protect their families. They hold hands when they're leaving the train. But the end of book 1 is just so heartbreaking, because sweet baby Peeta, I just want him to be protected. I have a very soft spot for Peeta. He's one of my favorite male characters in a series, and I just think he was kind of done wrong from once he got out of the games. Just kind of being led to believe that everything was real and nobody being straight up with him. But it just feels mean. And I think this ending to chapter 27 is just so beautiful. Her basically saying, I want to tell him how badly I miss him already. She cares so much about Peeta, even if she can't figure out if it's romantic or not. She dearly cares for him. And then her internal monologue, I could tell that the boy with the bread is slipping away. And haven't we all been there at some point where, even if it's not a romantic relationship, but it's another friendship or something, where you're just like, I can feel that something is changing and I don't know how to fix it. I just know that this person that I care about so much, something has been fractured there. The closeness is not there. And how relatable. What a touching moment.